Welcome to the Debka File, the compilation edition, in which we bring you highlights from the past month from Debka File's exclusive news, insight, and analysis in the Middle East. Let's take a look at the headlines. Russian air support for Syrian drive to capture Quneitra and Dara. Why Israel has slowed operations in Gaza and Syria. Iran to resume uranium enrichment. U.S. and Russia pull back troops in Syria. Trump to elevate Israel's NATO standing. Following Gaza clash, Iran poised for Quneitra operation. The new Saudi-UAE pact, backed by the U.S., launches a Hudaydah offensive. Following the failed talks between Putin and Netanyahu, the Russian Air Force bombed Syrian rebel targets to support Assad's southwest offensive, going against Russian promises to Israel. The Russian bombers launched 30 missiles over a province in Dara. Russia had previously told Israel it would withhold air support for Syria, despite giving Assad the green light to target Dara and Quneitra opposite Israel's Golan border. The Israeli-Russian talks failed because last month Syria attempted to trick Israel after Israel had agreed to a Russian plan to give the Beijing enclave on Mount Hermon to Syria by disguising Hezbollah troops with Syrian army uniforms. Russia and Syria falsely claim that Hezbollah and pro-Iranian Shiite militias are being pulled from the Israeli and Jordanian borders. The same deception is happening again in the southwest regions of Dara and Quneitra. While Russia was trying to convince Israel to drop support for the Syrian rebel groups holding Quneitra, they were also seeking U.S. consent to abandon the rebel Syrian Free Army, which was holding Dara on the Jordanian border. In backing the Syrian southern offensive, Russia ignored warnings from the U.S. Last week, the State Department warned Syria and Russia of repercussions if they violated the de-escalations arrangement made last year between U.S. President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. On Thursday, State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert had this to say at a press conference about the ceasefire violations in southwest Syria.
I want to be clear that we've expressed our grave concerns with the government of Russia. We've also expressed concerns and continue to have conversations with the Jordanians through the Amman Monitoring Center there. Secretary Pompeo has raised these concerns directly with Foreign Minister Lavrov. He's also had conversations with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about this. During the call over the weekend, when the Secretary, or perhaps it was on Monday, spoke to Foreign Minister Lavrov, we talked about how important it is, how critical it is for the mutual adherence to the arrangement, to the ceasefire arrangement, stood up nearly 1 year ago. This is something that we consistently had talked about, the success that humanitarian aid was able to get in. Lives were undoubtedly saved in southwest Syria because of this ceasefire arrangement. And now we start to see that Syrian regime military and also militia units have violated that de-escalation zone, the ceasefire zone in southwest Syria. They've initiated airstrikes, there have been artillery and rocket attacks, and that's a tremendous concern of ours.
Free Syria Army leaders received a letter from the U.S. government stating that the U.S. won't violate the de-escalation zone and they should not expect support from the U.S. in fighting Assad's forces. On Saturday night, Russian jets launched attacks in southern Syria. On Friday, Nikki Haley stated that the Syrian military escalation violates the de-escalation agreement and, quote, Russia will bear responsibility for further escalations in Syria. Israel could also be left on its own to ward off the Syrian army and its allies, Hezbollah and the pro-Iranian Shiite forces, up to its borders. The IDF has several options. First, it could practice non-intervention and passively accept the Syrian military presence along its northern border. Second, it could intervene by air and ground-to-ground missile strikes against Syrian military targets. Netanyahu and Trump are monitoring events in southern Syria. However, at this time, there's no sign of the Israeli military chiefs preparing for this operation. Meanwhile, there's a Syrian refugee problem building up on its Golan border. 12,000 refugees have fled their homes since the Syrian army captured villages in the Dara province, and many are setting up tents on the Israeli border. On Thursday, Washington warned Moscow and Damascus that Syrian military movements in the southwest would have serious repercussions as they violate the agreement made between Trump and Putin in 2017. Debka military sources report that although Syrian forces have remained stationary, over half of Assad's forces are ready for an offensive at any time. The IDF is not treating the Palestinians' flaming kite attacks and balloon assaults, which have been scorching acres of Israeli farmlands each day, as terror. On Monday, the IDF launched 9 airstrikes against Hamas military compounds in Gaza, but not at the Palestinians who have been producing the deadly kites. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant Gadi Eisenkot rejected the cabinet minister's demand to treat these attacks as terrorism, believing that there's a legal problem in defining kites and balloons as a threat to life. This was the first time that the IDF consulted lawyers before launching a military operation for defending the country. Following the IDF strikes, which demolished Iranian military bases in Syria, there's been a silence on Israel's northern front. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and General Gadi Eisenkot decided to hold their fire during the World Cup soccer finals in Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin reportedly asked Netanyahu to hold off on attacks in Syria until the games were over. This pause in Israel's attacks allowed Iran the time it needed to fix the demolished military facilities and import new weapons to replace the damaged ones. Israel is holding back from using its superior high-tech forces against Hamas's terror by arson and Iran's resupply of its damaged bases in Syria during the World Cup finals. A graph showing the decline of Palestinian terrorist operations over the past 3 years, as well as a map displaying the Iranian military lineup in Syria, was exhibited by Prime Minister Netanyahu at the Homeland Security Forum last week, attended by 20 countries. He stated that Israel owes its successes to advanced radar systems capable of reading the target's intentions and providing warnings of upcoming attacks. One tool, called FOPIN, created by Elta Systems, detects targets from several kilometers away through thick foliage while exposing secret Palestinian terrorist drills or preparations for attacks in remote areas surrounded by dense vegetation. This system also has been used on the Syrian and Lebanese borders to detect Hezbollah units. Iran warned that it would leave the nuclear accord unless benefits are underway. An atomic energy official in Tehran has stated that uranium enrichment would resume at the Fordow plant. Iranian President Rouhani has issued a warning to French President Emmanuel Macron that uranium enrichment would proceed. The Iranian president issued this statement.
جمهوری اسلامی ایران تاکنون به همه تعهدات خود مطابق برجام عمل کرده و سازمان انرژی اتمی تاکنون 11 بار پایبندی ایران را به این تعهدات تایید نموده. تمامی اعضای برجام در قبال تعهدات رفع تحریمی پذیرفته شده در برجام مسئولیت دارند و سایر اعضای ملل متحد نیز بر اساس قطعنامه 2231 شورای امنیت و ماده 25 منشور ملل متحد موظفند که به اجرای کامل برجام کمک نمایند و از هر اقدامی که مانع اجرای برجام بشه خودداری کنند. جمهوری اسلامی ایران فرصت محدودی را در اختیار کشورهای باقی مانده در برجام قرار داده تا چنانچه در عمل بتوانند نسبت به اجرای تمامی موارد توافق شده در برجام تضمین لازم رو ارائه نمایند.
On Wednesday, Iran's Atomic Energy Organization spokesman, Behrouz Kamalvandi, stated that based on the orders of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, new work would begin on the nuclear program. Kamalvandi stated that, quote, the Supreme Leader has ordered that the programs be carried out within the parameters of the nuclear deal, and when he gives the order, we will announce the programs for operating outside the nuclear deal for reviving Fordow. Debka reports that the Fordow plant is equipped with 8,000 advanced centrifuges, which are capable of churning out 20 PC-grade uranium, which is required to make nuclear weapons. At Natanz, Iran's second-largest enrichment site, the equipment includes high-speed IR-6 centrifuges. The Iranian Atomic Energy Organization's statement served several purposes. First, it made clear that Iran is unconcerned about the results of the U.S.-North Korean summit for denuclearization between U.S. President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Second, it was in response to Trump's comment following the summit, in which he said that Iran is in a different place compared to 3 months ago. Tehran made sure to communicate that they would continue on their nuclear path, going against Trump's strategy. The Fordow facility is difficult to destroy and is designed to resist attacks. Following a 2012 attempt to disrupt the plant by sabotaging its power supply, an independent power station was installed underground. Debka military sources report that despite these obstacles, Israel and the U.S. may have prepared military operations to strike Fordow. Last Tuesday, the U.S. withdrew from the northern Syrian town of Manbij as Russia withdrew Qasa'ir near Syria's border with Lebanon. Russian President Vladimir Putin stated the following at an annual televised question-and-answer session with Russian citizens.
Применение наших вооруженных сил в боевых условиях – это уникальный опыт и уникальный инструмент совершенствования наших вооруженных сил. Никакие учения не идут в сравнение с применением вооруженных сил в боевых условиях. Напомню, что тысячи боевиков, выходцев из Российской Федерации, из стран Средней Азии, с которыми у нас нет контролируемых границ, скопились там на территории Сирии. И лучше было работать с ними, условно говоря, работать и уничтожать их там, чем принимать их здесь с оружием в руках. Наши военные находятся там для того, чтобы обеспечить интересы России в этом жизненно важном регионе мира, близким очень от нас, и они будут там находиться до тех пор, пока это выгодно России.
Last Tuesday, Heather Nauert, State Department spokeswoman, stated that the U.S.-backed Syrian Kurdish YPG militia would withdraw from the northern Syrian town of Manbij. The U.S. has given the YPG fighters a guarantee of safe conduct for their retreat from Manbij to the area east of the Euphrates River. Turkish President Erdogan has removed Kurdish fighters from central and eastern Syria on the Turkish border, but has not achieved his goal to take over the city. Pompeo refuses to allow Turkish forces to move in and arrange for the town to be run by a new Manbij military council with U.S., French, and Kurdish military representatives. The Kurdish militia agreed to leave if some Kurdish military advisors could remain in the city to work with a military council. Pompeo agreed that Turkish military advisors could enter the town to keep track of the military council. Meanwhile, Washington and Ankara continue to remain divided. The Trump administration objects to Erdogan's decision to purchase advanced S-400 air defense missiles in Russia and is undecided on whether to sell Turkey F-35 stealth fighters. President Trump is putting together a plan to elevate Israel's NATO standing, upgrade its war arsenal, and expand the U.S. military presence in Israel. This week, North Atlantic Alliance Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that NATO will not support Israel if attacked by Iran since, quote, the alliance's security guarantee does not apply to Israel. He emphasized that NATO is not interested in getting involved in Middle East conflicts. Last week, Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu visited Germany, France, and the UK to change their stance on the Iran nuclear deal, but none of them were willing to alter their views. Debka military sources reveal that President Trump is planning to lift Israel's status in the alliance while expanding the presence of U.S. troops in Israel and adding to the IDF war arsenal. Stoltenberg and NATO West European leaders do not approve of the U.S. partnering with Israel, a non-member, for a possible strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. Meanwhile, Trump has several plans to increase Israel's military capabilities. First, he'll raise Israel from a major non-NATO ally to a member of the partnership, alongside Australia, Finland, Georgia, Jordan, and Sweden. This partnership was established to allow the countries to participate in NATO-led operations and the NATO Response Force. The U.S. fleet will establish a permanent presence in the Israeli ports of Haifa and Ashdod. U.S. Navy aircraft carriers will have a base there. The Lockheed Martin Aegis Combat System, an integrated naval weapons system which uses radar technology to track weapons for destroying enemy targets, will also be used at the ports. In 2017, the U.S. established its first military base in Israel on Mount Keren in the Negev desert to monitor Iranian airspace to the northeast for signs of missile launches. The radar on Mount Keren is the most advanced mobile radar in the world. The Israeli Air Force will also receive additional cargo helicopters and new aerial refueling tankers. The Israeli Army will be supplied with a large quantity of GBU-39s, which are precision-guided glide bombs. The Israeli Navy will be given commando boats and a new submarine manufactured at the Oregon Iron Works. The U.S. will add to its war reserve stock of weapons at the Negev base. The Trump administration is giving Israel and its armed forces the military resources to prepare for a war. The Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem issued a statement on Saturday that denied any media reports stating that Israel and Russia had come to terms with Iranian forces in Syria. Israel says no agreement has been made and continues to demand the evacuation of all Iranian forces in Syria. Debka file sources report that on Thursday, progress had been made during a phone call between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Russian President Putin, but there were no final agreements. Debka file exclusive reports that despite the opposite claims from media sources, Syrian, Iranian, and Hezbollah forces were indeed moving into southern Syria on Friday, opposite the Jordanian and Israeli borders. Russian President Putin presented a proposal for their removal to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu presented the plan to Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman. Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergei Lavrov said that only Syrian troops should have a presence on Syria's southern border.
Изначально договоренность о создании на юго-западе Сирии зоны деэскалации предполагала эвентуальный отвод всех несирийских сил из этой части Сирийской Арабской Республики. Итогом всей этой работы, которая должна продолжаться и продолжается, должна стать ситуацией, когда на границе Сирии с Израилем с сирийской стороны будут стоять представители вооруженных сил Сирийской Арабской Республики.
The Raqqa refugee camp is where the U.S. trains and equips armed Syrian opposition forces and sends them to eastern and southern Syria. Washington did not respond to Lavrov's comments. However, Netanyahu challenged him immediately, stating that the Iranian military does not belong in Syria, and if they do not vacate, Israel will continue its military attacks. Last Tuesday, Netanyahu told his cabinet that the campaign against Iranian aggression had not ended. We are working to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, against Iran's consolidated military presence against us, and operating against the transfer of deadly weapons from Syria to Lebanon or their manufacture in Lebanon. Debka military sources report that Netanyahu warned that Tehran's ballistic missiles and weapons in Syria and Lebanon are at risk, and if Iran continues importing them, they would be destroyed. Israel refuses to accept that Iran and Hezbollah could spread their missiles across Syria and Lebanon. Prior to Lieberman arriving in Moscow on Thursday, Iranian and Hezbollah forces expanded into 3 strategic locations facing Israel's Golan border. Hezbollah troops disguised in Syrian army uniforms appeared to follow Lavrov's instructions that only Syrian government forces can stand on the Israeli border. Lieberman was joined by military intelligence chief Major General Tamir Heineman and Defense Minister Senior Security Advisor Zohar Palti. The talks were urgent as the Iranian Hezbollah forces had been advancing on the Kenitra region. The forces, disguised in Syrian uniforms, took up positions on the hills surrounding the Syrian Golan town, then divided into sections. One section pulled back to the division base at Katana between Kenitra and Damascus, and another group branched north to the village of Hadar opposite the IDF's Mount Hermon outpost. From Hadar and the surrounding villages, Hezbollah has a close-up view of the surveillance of Israel's Golan outposts and border defenses. All forces are preparing to launch an offensive to take Kenitra from the Syrian rebel militias holding the town across from the Israeli border. If U.S. President Trump decides that the IDF can handle the Iranian threat on its northern border, Kenitra could soon be a new focal point for the escalating tensions between Iran and Israel. Saudi Arabian and UAE forces captured the Hodeidah airport from the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels on Saturday. This was the 3rd day of their offensive to capture the town. Their success is significant for several reasons. The assault force for capturing the airport is made up of 25,000 Yemeni army units who oppose the Houthi insurgency. Yemeni jets now can no longer bring in reinforcements to help the 2,000 Houthi fighters ward off the Saudi-UAE assault. According to Debka File's exclusive military sources, the Iranian-backed Houthi movement has been ridden with strife in the past year, which has led to assassinations of faction chiefs. U.S. President Trump, who considers Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Abu Dhabi Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed as allies, gave them the green light to go forward with the Hudaydah operation, which includes intelligence for marking targets, weapons for Air Force and artillery units, and refueling for coalition air raids. UN and European agencies attempted to prevent the offensive by threatening that it would cut the lifeline of the 22 million Yemenis who rely on the seaport through which humanitarian aid reaches the country. The civil war in Yemen has caused millions to die of starvation. This was made worse during the Houthis' control of Hudaydah and the port, as there was no one to distribute incoming food to the needy. Removing the Houthis from the town will open the channels for assistance to reach the helpless population. Wasim Ahmed, a spokesperson for the Yemeni government's High Committee of Humanitarian Relief, issued this statement.
وضربت 5 سفن تجارية وإغاثية في عرض البحر وفجرت مخازن برنامج الغذاء العالمي في محافظة الحديدة. 4 مخازن تم تفجيرها وأدى إلى إتلاف 5,000 طن من تلك المساعدات الإغاثية.
Saudi Arabia has made clear that after liberating the town from the Iran-backed insurgency, they would assist the UN in giving care to the needy population. Iranian support for the Houthi movement was exaggerated and was nowhere near the support they gave to the Lebanese Hezbollah. Hudaydah's fall to Saudi-UAE forces would be a military win over Tehran, which had plans to set up its Red Sea naval base at the Yemeni port. The offensive was launched after Saudi Arabia and the UAE established a new Gulf organization called the Saudi Emirati Coordination Council. Through this new establishment, the 2 crown princes, along with President Donald Trump, will be able to call the shots in the Gulf.
يتقدمون بمبادرة إنسانية جديدة تهدف إلى تكثيف وصول المساعدات الإنسانية والإغاثية عبر الحديدة لتشمل كامل المناطق المحررة من قبضة الميليشيات الحوثية المدعومة من إيران وغيرها من المناطق.
That's it for the compilation edition of the Debka File. We'll be back with you next week for exclusive news, insight, and analysis from the Middle East. Thanks for watching.